Most people believe that fear is an enemy, something to eliminate, to conquer, or to escape from. We spend our lives trying to suppress it with affirmations, disguise it with confidence, or drown it under achievements. From childhood, we're taught that courage means the absence of fear, that being strong means feeling nothing. But what if this belief is fundamentally misguided? What if fear is not the opposite of courage, but its birthplace? What if fear, instead of being our downfall, is the only door through which we can step into genuine power? Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher often misunderstood as a prophet of chaos and willpower, carried a very different secret. He saw fear not as weakness, but as the raw material of transformation. To Nietzsche, the person who avoids fear is not safe. They are unformed. They remain trapped in a half-lived life, unable to know their own depth because they never dared to face it. And that's where most of us live, just outside the borders of what frightens us, mistaking comfort for safety. We scroll, consume, and plan, but never confront the trembling that signals growth. Nietzsche's secret was that fear is the invitation to become more than you are. He once wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Fear, in this sense, is that inner chaos, the trembling before creation, the tension that makes transformation possible. In this video, we'll uncover Nietzsche's hidden method for overcoming fear, not by crushing it, but by walking straight into it. We'll explore how he redefined fear as a sacred teacher, how avoidance becomes psychological slavery, and how embracing the unknown can lead to what Jung later called individuation, the integration of one's shadow potential and authentic self. This is not a motivational speech. It's a descent into the dark valley where courage is not the absence of trembling, but the mastery of it. By the end of this journey, you will see why Nietzsche believed that only those who face their deepest fears can ever taste true freedom. Because the real prison is not made of walls, it's made of everything you refuse to face. To understand Nietzsche's secret to overcoming fear, we have to start by understanding what he meant by fear itself. For Nietzsche, fear wasn't merely an emotional reaction to danger. It was a metaphysical signal, a confrontation with the boundaries of who we think we are. When you feel fear, it isn't just your body trembling. It's your identity defending its limits. Fear arises when the self encounters something vast, uncertain, or uncontrollable, something that demands transformation. Most people experience this as panic avoidance or denial, but Nietzsche saw it as a sacred threshold. He called it the abyss, and warned that whoever looks into it must be prepared for the abyss to look back. That moment when everything you know about yourself starts to dissolve is not a curse. It's the beginning of self-overcoming. Imagine a man standing before a great mountain. At its base, he feels small, overwhelmed, intimidated. His instinct is to turn away, to tell himself, it's impossible. But Nietzsche would say this mountain is not an obstacle, it's your mirror. The height you fear reflects the height you're capable of. Fear, therefore, is the shape of your next evolution. It's your potential disguised as threat. When you run from it, you exile parts of your own strength. When you walk toward it trembling but aware, you reclaim power that was always yours. Nietzsche believed that most people never live, they merely obey. They obey fear by disguising it as rationality, comfort, or duty. They seek safety in crowds, in systems, in approval. They choose to be good, which in Nietzsche's language often meant to be obedient to authority, to religion, to habit. But this safety is an illusion. It is the comfort of the herd, the dull peace of the domesticated spirit. The individual who seeks truth must step away from that herd into solitude where fear becomes his only honest companion. Nietzsche's Übermensch, the overman, is not a superhuman in the comic book sense. He is simply the one who no longer obeys fear. He uses it. He transfigures it. Have you ever found yourself avoiding a decision, a career move, a conversation, a confession? Not because you don't know what to do, but because something in you is terrified of the consequences. That is fear, in its purest form, the edge between who you are and who you could become. The easy path is to rationalize, to say, now isn't the right time or it's not worth the risk. But beneath those sentences hides the silent tyrant Nietzsche spent his exiled life exposing the voice of comfort disguised as reason. That tyrant does not rule through chains, but through whispers. It says, stay small, stay safe, stay the same. Fear, then, is the mask of that tyrant. And like all tyrants, it thrives in the dark. In the corners of your awareness, you refuse to illuminate. Nietzsche's approach was radical because he didn't advocate suppressing fear nor escaping it. He proposed the opposite, to confront it directly, to love your fate, amor fati. This meant saying yes to everything life brings, not only pleasure and success, but pain, uncertainty, and failure. He believed that by saying yes to fear, you dissolve its power. Resistance feeds it. Acceptance transforms it. Let's translate this into real life. In your career, fear appears as self-doubt. What if I fail? In relationships, it appears as vulnerability. What if they see who I really am? In creativity, it appears as perfectionism. What if it's not good enough? Each of these fears is a mirror showing you the limits of your courage. Nietzsche's advice would be to step closer, not away. Because each time you face what frightens you, you expand the circumference of your freedom. Fear doesn't vanish, it evolves. It becomes awe, the trembling before life's vastness, no longer paralyzing, but electrifying. This is why Nietzsche described life as a dance upon the edge of chaos. To live fully is to accept instability, to walk into the storm, knowing it will change you. He said, live dangerously, not recklessly, but authentically. To live dangerously means to place yourself in situations where growth is inevitable because comfort is impossible. It means to enter the unknown voluntarily, to let the old self die so the new one can breathe. Carl Jung, who was deeply influenced by Nietzsche, later expanded this idea into the psychological process of individuation, the integration of the shadow. Jung saw fear as the first signal that the unconscious is calling for recognition. What we fear in others is often what we've disowned in ourselves. The person who fears conflict often hides aggression. The one who fears rejection hides longing. The one who fears failure hides desire. By facing these hidden parts, we reclaim our wholeness. Fear is not an enemy to defeat, but a messenger to understand. Nietzsche's metaphor of the abyss captures this perfectly. The abyss is not hell, it's potential. When you look into it, you are staring into everything you could become if you stopped clinging to safety. And yes, it looks terrifying because it means losing the false image of yourself you've built. But that's the price of freedom. He warned that he who fights monsters must see to it that he does not become one. In other words, if you fight fear with denial or aggression, it will consume you. But if you face it with awareness, it transforms you. So Nietzsche's secret is not a technique or a mantra. It's a posture toward life, an attitude of radical acceptance and courageous participation. You stop asking for the storm to end. You learn to dance in it. You stop waiting for the fear to disappear. You walk forward trembling but awake. Because fear is not the signal to retreat, it's the sign you're alive, standing at the frontier of your own becoming. And beyond that frontier, Nietzsche believed lies not peace, in the ordinary sense, but a deeper, ecstatic stillness, the silence of someone who has seen the abyss and learned to smile back at it. What happens when we do not confront fear? Nietzsche would say the soul begins to rot in its own avoidance. The person who spends a lifetime fleeing from fear ends up building their own invisible prison, made not of bars, but of habits, excuses, and compromises. They mistake the walls for protection, not realizing that those walls are made of their own potential, petrified, unused, buried alive. When fear is avoided, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. It becomes anxiety, resentment, and cynicism. It turns into the quiet despair of a life half-lived. You can see it everywhere, in the employee who complains about his job but never leaves it, in the lover who hides behind silence rather than speak their truth, in the artist who plans endlessly but never creates. Their lives are safe, but hollow. Nietzsche called this the life of the last man, the person who avoids pain, risk, and greatness in exchange for comfort. The last man has no fear because he has no ambition, no abyss to face, no soul to risk. We have invented happiness. Nietzsche mocked, describing them blinking and smug like cattle under artificial light. It is the comfort of those who have forgotten the ecstasy of danger. The cost of this avoidance is immense. Psychologically, it fragments us. Jung would later describe this as the dissociation of the self. We repress what we fear, and those repressed elements form our shadow, a part of the psyche that operates in secret. Every time you deny fear, you empower the shadow. It becomes the hidden director of your behavior, dictating your choices without your awareness. You may think you're free, but your life is governed by unconscious avoidance. You stay in shallow relationships because you fear intimacy. You stay silent in meetings because you fear rejection. You attack others' flaws because you fear being exposed. The mask of confidence becomes tighter, the inner voice weaker. The result is exhaustion, not from action, but from self-suppression. Nietzsche saw this as spiritual decay, a sickness of the will. In The Gay Science, he wrote, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. Even self-loathing becomes a form of control when we cannot face the vastness of existence. We would rather suffer predictably than risk transformation." That's why people cling to rules, dogmas, or ideologies, not because they are true, but because they offer the illusion of safety. Fear becomes institutionalized in religion, in politics, in routine. But this safety is poison. It numbs the instinct to transcend. There is a profound irony here. The more we try to eliminate fear, the weaker we become. Just as muscles atrophy when unused, the soul withers when unchallenged. Nietzsche believed that suffering, fear, and struggle were the crucibles of greatness. "What does not kill me makes me stronger" was not a slogan of arrogance, but an observation of psychological alchemy. Avoidance leads to fragility, confrontation leads to resilience. In avoiding fear, we create a society of timid souls, polite, civilized, and quietly terrified. They obey rules not out of morality, but out of fear of chaos. They work not out of passion, but out of fear of failure. They love not out of freedom, but out of fear of loneliness. This is not life. It is maintenance. And the most tragic part is that the longer we live this way, the more fear grows. It feeds on itself. The man who avoids risk becomes terrified of even the smallest uncertainty. The woman who hides her voice becomes afraid even of her own thoughts. The student who never questions authority forgets how to think. Fear breeds more fear until the entire psyche becomes a labyrinth with no exit. Nietzsche's words echo through time. He who cannot command himself will be commanded. The person who cannot face their inner fear becomes the servant of external forces, trends, approval, institutions. This is not theory, this is survival. Because fear is the mechanism through which life tests your vitality. To avoid it is to refuse the call to evolve. Nietzsche, like Dostoevsky, understood that confronting suffering is the only path to meaning. Jung would later confirm this. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. The treasure is not comfort. It is wholeness. It is the kind of strength that no external validation can give or take away. To ignore fear is to live as a shadow of yourself. To face it is to begin your real life. And that is the paradox. Nietzsche leaves us with: the very thing you flee from is the only thing that can make you free. Nietzsche's path to overcoming fear is not about domination, it is about transformation. He never told people to be fearless. Instead, he urged them to develop the courage to stay present within fear until it reveals its wisdom. This is what he meant by becoming who you are. The process is not sudden. It unfolds in stages, much like Jung's later model of recognition, observation, and integration. The first stage is recognition, to name the fear. Honestly, most people hide behind abstractions. I'm stressed. I'm unsure. I'm not ready. Nietzsche would say, drop the euphemisms. Call it what it is. I fear being rejected. I fear failing. I fear being seen. Naming the fear gives it shape. And once it has shape, it loses its tyranny. The second stage is observation, to stand before fear without fleeing or fighting. This is the most painful step because your entire conditioning screams, escape. But Nietzsche's idea of amor fati, love of fate, demands that you say yes even to the trembling. Sit with it. Watch how it moves through your body, how your mind invents stories to protect you. You are not the fear. You are the one observing it. That distinction is the beginning of mastery. The third stage is integration. The moment you act despite the trembling. Not recklessly, not performatively, but consciously. You make the call. You take the risk. You speak the truth. You publish the work. Every time you do, the old self that feared annihilation dies a little, and a new self, freer, more alive, is born. Nietzsche saw this as self-overcoming, the eternal process of dying and becoming. The snake that cannot shed its skin must perish, he wrote. Integration is the shedding, the choice to evolve. This journey is not glamorous. It is lonely, raw, and full of moments where you'll think you're going backward. But every descent into fear refines you. Every confrontation strengthens the muscle of authenticity. Eventually, fear stops being an enemy and becomes an ally, a compass pointing toward your next transformation. When you live this way, something profound happens. You stop seeking permission. You stop chasing comfort. You begin to embody what Nietzsche called authentic authority, the silent power of one who commands themselves. In that state, fear still visits you, but it no longer rules you. It becomes part of your fire. And that fire, disciplined, luminous, unafraid of its own darkness, is freedom. If this message resonates with you, share your reflections in the comments. What fear have you been avoiding? And what might it be trying to teach you? Subscribe for more journeys like this, not to escape fear, but to walk with it until it becomes strength. Because the one who learns to dance with fear will never be ruled by it again.